Hey YouTube, what's up? Welcome back. Just Christina here. This is round 2 of this information. This is the chemical list I promised you of what the Navy considers to be toxic. So these are the same things that we talked about in the What's in Chemical Aerosolization videos. Those are the last 2 videos I did, and we talked about the chemicals that are known between Harvard and the Navy and the geoengineering solar remediation projects, we'll call them. These are the same chemicals that are present, most of them. Now, this list that we're going to run down is just some things that the Navy has as a list of what they consider toxic. So as a biohazard, if any of our brave men and women in uniform were exposed to these, they would take extra precautionary measures to overcome accordingly. So I did get this out last night, but again, I thought it could just wait till today to get finished. Yesterday was a very, very busy day. It was Groundhog's Day, Super Bowl Sunday. It was my 43rd birthday yesterday. I had a wonderful weekend, and overall just another year older, and was able to finally get all my Christmas decorations down yesterday. So that was a gift within itself. Okay, let's get right into this list, okay? Because aluminum coated fiberglass, this is the first thing on the list. And this is one that we talked about extensively in the aerosolization rundown. So I'm not going to get too much into it because there's so much to be said about aluminum. But just know that it is not a free element in nature. This is something that has to be mined and then sprayed again as an aerosol, and it lands on the surface as a contaminant. So next comes one of the aromatic hydrocarbons. And I'm just going to identify them as hydrocarbons as we go along. But I wanted to give you the Science Direct definition. It's a very, very good breakdown of what a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon is. And this is a pollutant mostly from incomplete combustion of organic materials. So when we're burning things like coal or oil or wood or even petrol, even the gas in our gas tanks, an explosion or a fire happens and that substance is burned. So it's carcinogenic. It has toxins that are emitted from it as a byproduct of not being completely combusted or burned up. So these polycyclic hydrocarbons are toxic to humans because as we breathe them in, of course it's not oxygen or nitrogen, so it's a carcinogenic, and it can cause a lot of respiratory issues and cancers and other horrible problems. So, acetylnaphthalene. This is caused by bridging the gap from naphthalene and ethylene, and it's used mostly in insecticides and fungicides. It's found in exhaust from crude oil and coal tar. Now, interestingly, there is a pesticide as early as 1948 that has a patent on using the acetylnaphthalene, but in itself, again, it's an aromatic hydrocarbon. All right, barium, Ba number 56 on the periodic table. This is one that presents itself as yellow, and this is one that's also found on the list of what is in chemtrails. Barium is a cytotoxic and a genotoxic substance. Element. The cytotoxic factors include mostly lung tissue issues, so lung cancer, pulmonary fibrosis, problems like that. Again, it presents itself as yellow in the atmosphere when it's sprayed, but as a genotoxic, it mostly goes after the tumor suppressor genes, so you see really horrible things like tumors and cancer and things like that. Cadmium, CD number 48, that's next. This one I don't think was necessarily present on the list of chemical aerosolization, but it's on the list anyway, and it is a very highly toxic metal. So I thought it was very important to include it here because just 0.0002% can lead to renal damage, and you can start experiencing the effects of renal damage. It causes all kinds of cancers, cardiovascular problems, renal problems, gastrointestinal problems, neurological disorders, reproductive issues, and respiratory issues. So any exposure to cadmium at all is very toxic to humans. Chlorides are next, Cl number 17 on the periodic table. There's a few different chlorides involved here, like sodium chloride, which that's responsible for things like high blood pressure, simply because it affects those salt ion channels in our bodies. Hydrogen chloride is also on the list, and this presents as a gas, but when it mixes with moisture, it can cause things like burns, tissue damage to our lungs, and burns as we inhale them too. Magnesium chloride is on the list, and this one is really important to talk about as a chloride because this is one of the things that's found in industry. So this is used in things like ice melt, but it can cause all kinds of problems: nausea, flu-like symptoms, muscle pain. It increases your white blood cells, so you have a lot of swelling, and it weakens your immune system. And again, it can even be fatal. So one thing to point out about ice melt is it can also burn the paws of our little furry pets. So if you are using ice melt, make sure that your animals don't have to be exposed to it, because it can be very damaging to them. So next is chromium, CR number 24. This also causes respiratory, lung, nasal, and sinus cancers. It's toxic. It's a very toxic element. It can also cause skin problems like dermatitis. Copper is next, Cu number 29 on the periodic table. Now, I know that some of these things on the list we have in our bodies, but things like copper and iron on the list are here because in high doses, they can lead to things like metal poisoning, and that's a problem. Because if one cancels the other out, then you have absorption problems. Hydrogen cyanide is next. And, fluoranthene, we skipped that one, sorry. That is another polycyclic hydrocarbon. Moving on, HCN, that's hydrogen cyanide. This is found in things like pits of fruits, cherries and apricots and things like that. It's used in fumigation. It's used to make plastics and dyes and synthetic fibers. But too much exposure to cyanide, we all know, is deadly. Fe28 iron is next. This one is the most common element on Earth by mass, but it's very, very corrosive to humans on our cells in large doses. So a large dose of iron in our body would be like 60 milligrams per kilogram. And low levels, like if you measured them daily, a low level would be considered like 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram. And we know that low levels of iron lead to things like anemia. Okay, PB number 82, lead is next. This is mostly present from occupational exposure, like welders or painters. They inhale these toxins. They can lead to things like irritability, headaches, aggressiveness, stomach problems, causes developmental delays in children. And we've heard all those horror stories about cities not being able to change out their lead pipes yet. But it's very, very vital not to have high levels of exposure to lead because it can cause even things like cardiac arrest. And the CDC states that blood levels greater than or equal to 5 micrograms per deciliter in children is considered toxic. So of course it's going to be a little bit higher in adults. It's probably 8 micrograms per deciliter. But still, that's not very much considering how toxic and corrosive just that amount is on the human cells. And manganese is next, Mn25. So this is another, it's not a free element in nature like aluminum. This is something that has to be mined from the earth. It's something that is a byproduct or a constituent from things that is later deposited back onto the soil, and then it becomes a problem. So in the refining of iron, the processing of stainless steel, we see manganese as a byproduct. Causes things like hallucinations, shaking, mental problems like psychosis, leg cramps, sleepiness, tremors, and it's also linked to anemia because it interferes with iron absorption. So again, it's very important to balance the minerals in our body as well. Okay, now we have a couple more polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons on the list, like naphthalene. These things are present in like mothballs, toilet deodorants, you know, those little cakes that make your toilet smell better. So these, like naphthalene, also fills naphtha if you're old enough to know what that is as a laundry additive. These polycyclic hydrocarbons are just all kinds of fumes that are present that cause lung and tissue damage. The percolates, potassium percolate and percolate are next. These are very strong oxidizers. Potassium is something that we have to have regulated in our body. We do have it, but foods that are very, very rich in potassium percolate or percolate, like the dry goods, the baby foods, cereal, flour, spices, things like that, it can lead to hypothyroidism. So that's the low thyroid production. And it affects the thyroid's uptake of iodine. So it actually interferes with the thyroxine hormone, which is also, it interferes with metabolism regulation. So it's very important to watch your intake of potassium percolate also. It can be toxic in large doses. All right, the next couple of things on the list, rocket fuel and jet fuel. I think these are present in the atmosphere just by proxy, because as long as we have rockets and as long as we have jets, we're always going to have the byproducts of the emissions of the fuel. And if you do work in aviation and you do experience things like dizziness or headaches or nausea or mental impairments, then I would strongly suggest you get checked to see if you have carcinogenic effects from these fuel byproducts. Right? Toluene is also on the list. This is another aromatic hydrocarbon. It's found in things like paint thinner, glue, whiteout, nail polish remover, tanning leather products. And so I hope you're seeing a trend of these polycyclic hydrocarbons. They're found in things that have a very strong odor. And I think that odor is present to be offensive to our senses. So things like paints and thinners, nail polish remover, mothballs. Those are not things that you should be putting your nose up to and inhaling and saying, smell that. Those are things that are very toxic and potentially damaging to your body. Okay, xylene or xylol is next. It's another hydrocarbon, and this is one of those trimethyl benzoyne toluene breakdowns. It causes things like skin problems, dermatitis, rashes. It can cause eye and lung problems, respiratory problems, problems on your, renal failure, liver and kidneys, memory impairments, and again, it's another hydrocarbon. Zinc is the last thing on the list, ZN number 30 on the periodic table. Again, we need zinc. We do have minerals in our body, but too much causes things like nausea and stomach pain. And it counteracts copper absorption in the small intestine. So if you have a copper deficiency, it can actually cause your red blood cells. It causes problems with your red blood cells. So that is an oxygen transport. And it also causes problems with your white blood cells. It creates a deficiency, which is an immune impairment. So going through this list, a lot of these same things are found on the list of chemical aerosolization, including lead, iron, aluminum, chlorides, barium, and all kinds of hydrocarbons. So in itself, any one of these could kill you, but combined all together, they will kill you. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm glad we were able to make it through this list. I'm going to move on next and redo some of the factors, redo a couple of videos that I removed for this whole change, but I'm going to put the information back up because I think it's very important, especially right now. So again, thanks for joining me. Have a great night. Just Christina signing out.